There is a woman listening to this right now who has stopped doing something that used to define her entire existence. She has stopped performing. She is not sure when it happened exactly. There was no single moment, no dramatic event, no conscious decision. It was more like a tide going out. One day she noticed that the thought of getting dressed up for a social event made her feel physically heavy, not nervous, not insecure, heavy, like her bones had doubled in weight. She noticed that conversations she used to navigate effortlessly had become exhausting. Not because the people were difficult, but because the mask she wore to engage with them had become unbearable. She noticed that the apps she used for dating sat unopened on her phone for weeks, then months. Not because she had given up on love in some wounded, defeated way, but because the entire machinery of presenting herself, packaging herself, performing the version of femininity that the world expects, had simply ground to a halt. The engine stopped, and she does not know how to restart it. She is not even sure she wants to. The people around her have noticed. They use words like withdrawn, disconnected, antisocial, and the one that cuts deepest, depressed. She has considered the possibility herself. She has Googled the symptoms. She has sat in quiet rooms wondering if she should call a therapist, not because she feels despair, but because she feels nothing. An enormous, spacious, terrifying nothing where all of her motivation used to live. And the scariest part is that this nothing does not feel entirely wrong. Somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, beneath the pressure to snap out of it, there is a whisper so faint she almost misses it every time. And the whisper says finally, what is happening to this woman? Why would a functioning, intelligent, previously social and engaged human being suddenly lose all interest in the performance of her own life? Is she broken? Is she ill? Is this the beginning of a clinical spiral that requires medical intervention? Or is it something else entirely? Something that Carl Jung spent the final decades of his life trying to articulate. Something so counterintuitive that modern psychology still does not have a proper category for it. Something that looks identical to collapse on the outside, but is actually, on the inside, the most creative and necessary event a human psyche can undergo. What if this is not a breakdown? What if it is a dismantling? And what if the thing being dismantled was never really you in the first place? Before we continue, welcome to Carl Jung Decoded. This is a side of psychology that most people never explore, but these ideas deserve to be understood. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments, and it helps us build a community of people who believe these ideas can change lives. To understand what is happening to this woman, we need to go somewhere that most conversations about mental health never go. We need to go beneath the symptoms, beneath the behavior, beneath what can be observed and measured. We need to go into the structure of the psyche itself and examine what happens when that structure begins to voluntarily disassemble. Jung spent years studying a process that most ancient traditions understood intuitively, but that modern culture has almost entirely forgotten. It is the process of psychological death and rebirth, not metaphorical death, not poetic death, functional death. The actual cessation of a psychic structure that has been running the show for years, sometimes decades. And the structure that dies first, the one that must die before anything authentic can be born, is the one Jung called the persona. The persona is the face you show the world. It is not a lie exactly, but it is a construction. Every woman builds a persona from the raw materials available to her. Cultural expectations, family conditioning, romantic feedback, social reward and punishment, media images, and the 1,000 small daily signals that tell her who she is supposed to be. The persona says, this is how you should look, this is how you should speak, this is how you should respond when a man shows interest, this is how you should behave at a dinner party, this is how you should present your pain, this is how you should package your intelligence so it does not threaten anyone. This is how you should perform caring, perform warmth, perform openness, perform femininity. The persona is not one mask, it is dozens, a different one for every context. And the woman wearing them has been switching between them so fluidly for so long that she has forgotten they are masks at all. She thinks the masks are her face. This is why the death phase feels so annihilating. When the persona begins to dissolve, the woman does not experience it as the removal of something external. She experiences it as the death of herself, because she has identified with the masks so completely that when they start to fall away, she does not know who is underneath, There may be nobody underneath. That is the terror. That is the void she is staring into when she sits alone in her apartment at 2 in the morning, feeling like a stranger in her own body. She is not losing her mind. She is losing her construction. And because she never knew the difference between the two, the loss feels total. Jung borrowed a term from medieval alchemy to describe this phase. He called it the nigredo, the blackening. In alchemical symbolism, the nigredo is the first stage of the great work. It is the stage where the original material, the prima materia, must be reduced to its most basic, chaotic, undifferentiated state before it can be transformed into something higher. The alchemists described it as putrefaction, as death, as a descent into absolute darkness. They understood that creation requires destruction first. You cannot build a cathedral on a foundation that is already occupied by a different building. The old structure must come down completely. Every brick, every beam, down to the bare earth. Only then can the new structure rise. Jung saw in this alchemical process a perfect description of what happens in the psyche during individuation. The nigredo is the phase where everything false must die. Every inherited belief about who you are. Every conditioned response about what you should want. Every performance you have been maintaining to keep the world comfortable with your existence. All of it must be burned away. And the burning feels exactly like depression because, from the perspective of the ego, it is depression. The ego is watching its entire kingdom crumble, and it has no context for understanding why. This is the critical distinction that modern psychology almost always misses. Clinical depression and the nigredo can look identical from the outside. The symptoms overlap almost perfectly. Loss of interest in activities, social withdrawal, fatigue, emotional flatness, difficulty finding meaning, sleep disruption. But the internal experience is fundamentally different. Depression is characterized by a collapse of energy into helplessness. There is a quality of stuckness, of being trapped in a loop with no exit. The nigredo, by contrast, carries beneath its darkness a strange quality of movement. Something is happening. The woman in the death phase may not be able to name it, but she can sense it. There is a current running beneath the stillness, a rearrangement taking place in the basement of her psyche while the upper floors go dark. Depression says nothing matters. The nigredo says nothing you believed matters. And the difference between those two statements is the difference between an ending and a beginning. There is an ancient myth that Jung returned to repeatedly when discussing the feminine experience of the nigredo. It is the Sumerian story of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, who voluntarily descends into the underworld. This myth is over 4,000 years old, and it describes, with breathtaking psychological precision, exactly what the woman in the death phase is going through. Inanna does not fall into the underworld. She chooses to go. She walks toward the darkness, and at each of the 7 gates she must pass through, she is required to remove one piece of her royal garment, her crown, her necklace, her breastplate, her robe. One by one, the symbols of her identity, her status, her power, her beauty are stripped away. By the time she reaches the throne room of the underworld, she is naked. She has nothing left. She is nobody. And then she is killed, hung on a hook in the darkness like a piece of meat. This is not a story about punishment. This is a story about what transformation requires. Inanna must become nothing before she can become something new. She must be stripped of every external marker of identity so that whatever resurrects is not a construction of the old self, but a genuine birth of something that has never existed before. The death is not the enemy of the process. The death is the process. Every woman in the death phase is Inanna at the gates. The loss of interest in dating is a garment being removed. The loss of desire to socialize is another garment falling to the ground. The loss of motivation to perform femininity, to dress up, to present, to curate, to attract. Each one is a gate being passed through. And each removal feels like a loss because from the perspective of the persona, it is a loss. The persona is dying, and the persona does not go quietly. It fights. It generates anxiety. It sends up emergency signals. Something is wrong with you. You need to get back to normal. People are going to think you are strange. You are going to end up alone. You are wasting your life. These thoughts feel urgent and true. But they are not coming from the authentic self. They are coming from the dying persona, which is doing what any structure does when it faces annihilation. It screams. The woman who is deep in this phase must understand something that no one around her is likely to tell her. The screaming is supposed to happen. The fear is supposed to be there. The disorientation is supposed to feel overwhelming. She is not handling this badly. She is handling it exactly the way the psyche intended. The Negredo is not a comfortable process. It was never designed to be comfortable. It was designed to be thorough. Because what is being cleared away is not superficial. It is structural. Every belief she absorbed about what makes a woman valuable. Every behavior she adopted to secure love. Every modification she made to herself to be palatable, acceptable, chosen. All of it. Down to the foundation. And foundations do not crumble silently. If you are in this phase right now, and you have been questioning whether you will ever feel normal again, I need you to hear this clearly. What you are calling normal was the performance. What you are experiencing now is the first honest thing your psyche has done in years. Do not rush it. Do not medicate it away without first understanding what it is. And do not let anyone shame you back into the mask. There is a specific sequence to how the death phase unfolds. And understanding this sequence can mean the difference between a woman who trusts the process and a woman who panics and tries to reconstruct the old self before the transformation is complete. The first thing that dies is the social persona. This is the most visible layer, and it is usually the first to go because it is the most exhausting to maintain. The woman stops wanting to attend events. She stops reaching out to friends. She stops maintaining the social calendar that once organized her entire life. She does not feel angry at these people. She does not feel wounded by them. She simply feels an absence of desire to engage. The energy that once flowed towards social performance has been redirected inward by the unconscious. And there is simply not enough fuel to power both the external show and the internal transformation simultaneously. The psyche has made a choice, and it has chosen the inner work. The second thing that dies is the romantic persona. The part of her that was oriented toward attracting, securing, and maintaining romantic attention goes dark. Dating profiles feel absurd. Flirting feels hollow. Even the fantasy of meeting someone new, which once generated excitement, now generates nothing or even a faint nausea. This is not a fear of intimacy. This is not avoidance born from heartbreak. This is the animus projection beginning to withdraw. The unconscious masculine element that was being projected onto potential partners is being pulled back inside the psyche for integration. The woman does not yet know that what she is losing interest in is not love itself, but the projective version of love that was based on need rather than wholeness. She only knows that something that used to drive her has stopped, and the absence of that drive feels like the absence of being alive. The third thing that dies is the performance of femininity itself. This is the deepest layer and the most disorienting. The woman loses interest in her appearance, not from self-neglect, not from low self-esteem. She simply stops experiencing the rewards that grooming, styling, and presenting once provided. The ritual of getting ready that once felt like self-expression now feels like costume design for a character she no longer wants to play. She may stop wearing makeup entirely. She may simplify her wardrobe to near uniformity. She may cut her hair. These external changes are not the transformation. They are artifacts of it. The transformation is happening inside, where the entire architecture of performed femininity, the version of womanhood that was built to be perceived rather than to be real, is being taken apart beam by beam. Beneath these three deaths, in the space that their removal creates, something extraordinary begins to happen. But it happens in the dark. It happens in silence. It happens without witnesses. And it happens so slowly that the woman herself may not recognize it for months. What is happening is that the self, the Jungian self, the true center of the psyche that exists beneath the ego, beneath the persona, beneath every conditioned identity, is beginning to emerge. Not emerge in the triumphant cinematic sense. Emerge the way a seed emerges in soil, invisible, fragile, entirely dependent on darkness for its first stage of growth. Jung described the self as the totality of the psyche, the archetype of wholeness that contains every opposite within it. The self is not the ego. The ego is the small conscious identity that says, I am this kind of person. The self is the vast, largely unconscious reality that contains everything the ego has rejected, everything the persona has hidden, and everything the shadow has swallowed. When the persona dies and the ego's grip loosens, The self has space to make itself known for the first time. And it does not announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself with silence, with stillness, with a strange new quality of presence that the woman notices in her quietest moments. She is sitting alone, doing nothing. And for the first time in her life, the nothingness does not feel like a problem to be solved. It feels like a space to be inhabited. She is present in a way she has never been before, out present to the world, present to herself. This is the birth, not a dramatic emergence, not a sudden transformation, a quiet opening. Like an eye that has been shut for decades slowly, painfully adjusting to a light it has never seen before. The woman in this phase does not yet know who she is becoming. She cannot see the full picture. She only knows that the old picture has been taken down and the wall is bare. And there is something terrifying but also deeply inexpressibly honest about a bare wall. It does not pretend to be anything. It does not perform. It simply is. And for a woman who has spent her entire life as a gallery of curated images, the bare wall is both the scariest and the most sacred thing she has ever encountered. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he never said the becoming was pleasant. He never promised comfort. What he promised was authenticity. And authenticity, it turns out, is not a destination you arrive at with a smile. It is a place you arrive at stripped, exhausted, and blinking in a light you have never seen before, wondering who you are now that everything you thought you were has been burned to the ground. But here is what Jung also knew, what the alchemists knew, what the ancient myth of Inanna knew. What rises from the ashes of the Negredo is not a restoration of the old self. It is something that has never existed before. A woman who does not need external validation to know her own worth. A woman who does not need a relationship to feel complete. A woman who does not need social approval to feel safe. A woman who does not need to perform femininity because she has become femininity. Not the cultural caricature of it, but the real thing, the deep thing. The ancient thing that existed before magazines and algorithms, and dating apps reduced womanhood to a set of marketable behaviors. This woman is not cold. She is not disconnected. She is not antisocial. She is the most connected she has ever been. But she is connected to something real for the first time. She is connected to herself. And from that connection, every other connection she forms will be fundamentally different from anything she experienced before. She will not seek love from a place of hunger. She will offer it from a place of fullness. She will not perform interest to secure attention. She will be genuinely interested, or she will be genuinely silent. She will not curate a version of herself that is designed to be chosen. She will simply exist, authentically, unapologetically, without performance, and she will discover something that the persona could never teach her. The right people do not need you to perform. They need you to be real. And being real, after a lifetime of construction, feels like being born. So if you are in the dark right now, if you are in the silence, if you are in the nothing that has replaced everything you used to be, I am not going to tell you to be patient. I am not going to tell you that it gets better. I am going to tell you something more honest than that. You are in the most important room you have ever entered, and the door locked behind you on purpose, not to trap you, to protect the process. Because what is being built inside you right now cannot be built in public. It cannot be built while you are performing. It cannot be built while you are checking your phone for validation. It can only be built in the dark, in the quiet, in the fertile emptiness that the death of your old self has created. You are not falling apart. You are being composted. And compost, if you let it do its work, does not remain waste. It becomes the richest soil on earth. The soil from which the most authentic, most grounded, most unshakable version of you will eventually grow. Not the version the world asked for. The version your soul has been waiting for your entire life. Stay in the dark. Let the process finish. What is coming is worth every moment of the nothing. If something in this shifted the ground beneath your feet, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. What we explore here is not the kind of psychology that keeps you comfortable. It is the kind that keeps you honest. And honesty is where every real transformation begins.